Good morning to you and welcome to our Bible talk on this beautiful, stunning Tuesday morning. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us and I hope you find the reading helpful this morning. We are working our way through the letter to the Hebrews. Fascinating book, as I always say. We don't know who wrote it, but we speculate it could be a friend of Paul's. We don't know who it was written to, probably sort of Christians with a Jewish background or something, and we don't know when. We do know it was written to Christians having a hard time, who I think had drifted away in their faith. That's kind of the overall thrust of the book. He's basically saying, you may be struggling, but keep the faith. But that's where we're at. We're in chapter 3, verses 1 to 8 this morning. So here goes. Beg your pardon. Hebrews chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. Therefore, holy brothers, you who share in a heavenly calling, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession, who is faithful to him who appointed him, just as Moses was also faithful in all God's house. For Jesus has been counted worthy of much more glory than Moses, as much more glory as the builder of has more honor than the builder of a house has more honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. Now Moses was faithful in all God's house as a servant, to testify to the things that were to be spoken later. But Christ is faithful over God's house as a son. And we are his house, if indeed we hold fast our confidence and our boasting in our hope. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, the writer is writing to these people who are struggling, and they're being tempted to drift away from their faith. And the reading is about, the whole book really is about giving some encouragement. But he starts off by saying to them, and I think we all need, and I think these are words that we all need to hear, because we all go through tough times, but the good words hearing it the best of times anyway. He says, first he calls, therefore holy brothers, means brothers and sisters, of course. I don't know how often you think of yourself as holy. I know what I'm like, but actually holy means set apart. And here we are called holy brothers and sisters. We are a holy family. We might not always feel very holy in ourselves. Our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. Holiness isn't the way we naturally describe ourselves. And as a church, we wouldn't necessarily, when we argue about colours of drain pipes and when people fall out in church and you hear all sorts of stories, we don't always think of ourselves as a holy family. But that's what the writer here does. He says, therefore, holy brothers and sisters, we're a holy family. I think that's quite a lovely thought. So, when you go to church at the weekend or whatever, this is a holy family, actually. That's a lovely thought. And I think we should be encouraged by the fact that he calls us here. We are a family who are set apart for God. Then he says, we've got a heavenly calling. Believe it or not, you and I have been called from heaven. That's a lovely thought, isn't it? You think about hearing angels' voices ringing, and actually we are here because we are in the body of Christ. We are parts of the church. We are Christians because we've been called by heaven. We're a heavenly called people. That's quite a lovely thought too. But then he goes on to talk, he or she, we goes to talk about addressing the problem. And he basically says, consider Jesus. And this reminds me a bit of a song we used to sing. I won't sing it, but the words used to go, fix your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will go strangely dim in the light of his wonder and grace. So it used to be, cast your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glorious grace. And that's what the writer is saying. He's basically saying, just think about Jesus, consider Jesus, think about Jesus. And he calls himself the apostle and high priest of our confession. Now, an apostle is somebody who's sent, like I said before, a post, or post is something you sent. And an apostle here is somebody who's sent by God to people. A high priest, on the other hand, is somebody who speaks for people to God. So it's quite unusual here because Jesus is both an apostle and a priest. Jesus is both the high apostle, the one who was sent by God. God sent him to us. He's both the apostle, but he's also a high priest. He's the one who's in heaven, interceding, speaking to God on our behalf. So here you've got Jesus is both God's apostle, somebody who's sent by God to us, but also somebody who speaks to God for us by being the high priest. So think about Jesus like that. Jesus is both the main one, if your main event speaking to God for us, but also the main event speaking to us from God as well. That's quite unusual there. You just think about Jesus in that respect. Then he also goes on, so he talks about Jesus being a high priest and apostle. He also talks about Jesus being faithful. Jesus didn't just walk the walk. Jesus didn't just talk the talk. Jesus actually walked the walk as well. When he was on earth, he was completely faithful. He went all the way with God, ultimately giving his life for the world. He didn't just think about it. He didn't just touch around the edges. He didn't do bits of it. He was faithful all the way. And so Jesus is not only an apostle, he's also a high priest. He's also faithful. You know, he was true to his calling. He did, and he was, and he is everything that people say he is. So Jesus was and is faithful to God, who sent him on earth to do what he had to do. And then to try and make the point, he kind of compares. He picks one of the holiest people he can find, and he compares Jesus with them. He goes to talk about Moses, who bear in mind is writing to Hebrews, who are basically Christians with a Jewish background or with great pedigree in Judaism. He picks Moses of all people to pick. And he talks about Moses being faithful. And of course, all the people who read the Old Testament will know that Moses was faithful. That Moses was the guy who was called by God and led the people of God out of slavery and led the people across the desert. That Moses was a great faithful person. But he goes on to say that as Moses was faithful, so Jesus is faithful too. But to make the point of how wonderful Jesus is, he makes a contrast as well. He says that Moses was faithful as a brick, if you like, but Jesus is faithful as a son in the house. So he talks about Moses being great, but the point you want to see here is that Jesus is much greater. So Moses was faithful. Jesus is also faithful, but Jesus is so much more. And you get quite a lot of that language in the Bible as well about so-and-so, but how much more? And here you've got Moses, this great exemplar of faithfulness, and Jesus is even more faithful, but as a son. And Jesus is, and what the writer is saying is, you know, this confession that we have, this hope we have, it's ours, but we need to hang on to it and don't let it go. Indeed, we hold fast, beg your pardon, if we are his house, if indeed we hold fast to our confidence and boasting in our hope. So it's our hope if we hang on in there. So again, he's saying, brothers and sisters, I know it's tough, but hang on in there. So what do we learn from this morning's reading? Well, we learn firstly that we are a holy family, which is quite an amazing thought, really, who've been called by heaven. We might not feel called by heaven very much, but actually we are holy. We're a holy family, and we've been called from heaven. Jesus, as he said, cast your eyes on Jesus. Jesus is both our apostle, someone who's spoken to God who speaks to us from God. He's also a priest, somebody who speaks to God for us. So he both speaks to us from God, he also speaks to God from us, apostle and high priest. And he talks about then, to make a comparison, he finds the most holy person you can think of, Moses, and he says, as Moses was faithful, so Jesus is faithful too. Except to say, to make the point, Jesus is so much more because he's a son in the house. So the writer of Hebrews, to pick it up, he's saying, all these things, you're a holy family, you've got this hope, Jesus is this fantastic, but hang on in there, folks. It's our hope if we keep on to it. Don't give up. Keep the faith, keep believing, keep trusting, and that hope is ours. Hope that makes sense. God bless you.